So this morning, our focus is on Sufism, the mystic poets of Sufism. And Sufism really is less a religion and more a way of life. It's more a way of life. And the ultimate goal is love. It's really pretty simple. It's divine love. It's a divine love that brings us intimately close to God, to the God of our own being, to the God in everything. It's ultimately a love that dissolves the me into thee, the me into thee. I wrote a song. One of the verses go, ultimately there's not two. Love dissolves the me and the you. And there's just this one heart so deep and wide. Yeah. So through this path of love, we more and more embody living knowledge, the living knowledge of the one ultimate reality. And the journey, this journey of the heart, it cannot be intellectualized. And my spiritual teacher Amma would always say that, you know, if you think too much about God and talk too much about God, it's like licking a picture of honey, right? Versus tasting the honey, right? We want to taste the honey. And to me, the mystic poets, and the way that Daniel shared the poetry this morning, it transmits the tasting, right? It transmits the tasting, and you know, it's so powerful that just hearing the words can take us there. They can take us beyond the mind. And Hafiz, I've always called him Hafiz. Is it Hafiz or okay? Okay, well, I'm used to saying Hafiz, so I probably, those neurons are stuck that way. So I'm going to probably say Hafiz. Hafiz, okay. Well, he is my favorite poet of all time. And I tried to write this talk and not just talk about him. So it's going to be about half this talk. I'm going to talk about him because I love him so much. And I just love that poem by Hafiz you shared. But he describes the journey of this path of the heart and how this is how it ends up. My dear, after such a long, long journey, God has made another soul free. Now, all Hafiz wants to do is open a beautiful tavern where this sacred wine of God's truth, knowledge, and love is forever and ever freely offered to you. Don't you want to go to that tavern? Let's all go there. We are that, actually. We can be that here and now, and we are this morning. But you know, his words, I feel like he's this dear friend, this intimate friend. And I feel like his poetry speaks to each of us like that. And it's so playful, right? It's so playful, and it's, you know, it's palatable. It's like we're hanging out with this divinely inebriated friend, right? And they just see everything through the eyes of love, right? That's the only way they can see. There's such beautiful teachings in his poetry. One that's kind of fun and funny is, you know, he's describing how instead of seeking all the things of the world, which are like tinsel, seek the source of things, right? The gold that provides all the tinsel. And he puts it this way: learn to recognize the counterfeit coins that may buy you just a moment of pleasure, but then drag you for days like a broken man behind a farting camel. It's hard to get that image out of your mind, you know. It's and that's the power of it, right? It's a message you can't forget. Hafiz was born in 1320. And it's interesting to me that he was born 47 years after Rumi died. I'm always like interested in, you know, reincarnation, especially when it's, you know, similar souls. It just gets me thinking, you know. But Hafiz is said to be the most beloved poet of Persia, which of course present day Iran. And they even have a Hafiz Day. They celebrate it every October 12th in Iran. So over his lifetime, Hafiz became a Sufi master, and he became, a deep philosopher and thinker and mystic. And his poetry is considered unique in world literature. Daniel Ladinsky, who extensively translated Hafiz, he wrote that it's a poetry that celebrates every expression of love in the universe. I think that's pretty broad. I think that's it. And part of what is so palpable to me that I feel in his poetry is the compassion for when we feel out of touch, like when we feel out of touch with love, when we aren't feeling love's embrace and love's kiss. One of my very favorite poems of all time, I can't recite it as well as Daniel, but I still want to read it to you and share it with you because it's just so true, and I think it's how we all feel at times. It's called I Know the Way You Can Get. I know the way you can get when you have not had a drink of love. Your face hardens, your sweet muscles cramp. Children become concerned about a strange look that appears in your eyes, even begins to worry your own mirror and nose. Squirrels and birds sense your sadness and call an important conference in a tall tree. They decide which secret code to chant to help your mind and soul. Even angels fear that brand of madness that arrays itself against the world and throws sharp stones and spears into the innocent and into oneself. Oh, I know the way you can get if you have not been out drinking love. You might rip apart every sentence your friends and teachers say, looking for hidden clauses. You might weigh every word on a scale like a dead fish. You might pull out a ruler and measure from every angle in your darkness the beautiful dimensions of a heart you once trusted. I know the way you can get if you have not had a drink from love's hands. That is why all the great ones speak of the vital need to keep remembering God. So you will come to know and see him as being so playful and wanting, just wanting to help. That is why Hafiz says, bring your cup near me, for I'm a sweet old vagabond with an infinite leaking barrel of light and laughter and truth that the beloved is tied to my back. Indeed, please bring your heart near me, for all I care about is quenching your thirst for freedom. All a sane man can ever care about is giving love. Mm. Oh, tell me what that says to you. Tell me what that evokes in you. No words. What else? Yeah. Yes.
It tells me that there are deep wells of truth in Islam, and God has blessed
Yes.
us. Allah has blessed us in so many ways.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Love that. Anybody else? Yes, Patty.
It speaks to me that God is in everyone, just waiting for that invitation.
Yes. Oh, beautiful. God is in everything, waiting for that invitation. I realize you folks on Zoom aren't hearing that. Yes. Yes.
It mentioned to me that there are lots of people that are carrying that barrel.
Oh.
We don't have to go very far. Lady right there has one.
I love it. Oh, there are lots of people carrying that barrel on their backs. We don't have to go very far to find that leaking barrel of laughter and light and truth.
It made me think about the negativity, that first part. I know how
Yeah.
you can get.
Yeah.
And pessimism.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of times I go to pessimism, but I go there.
Yeah.
The way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it's telling the truth about that. All we have to do is read the news, right? And we go there. Yeah. The way we can get when we haven't been drinking love, we've been drinking the news, right? Anything else? Michael, did you have something? No. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I love that line, keep remembering God. That is so core to Sufism. Um, when we do keep remembering God, which we do here, and we hopefully do many moments of our day, this trickle of our human love that we've cultivated expands, right? And our love grows. It becomes wider. It becomes less. It becomes more inclusive and less conditional, right? That's the movement towards the divine love that's all embracing. Hafiz obviously is incredibly wild and untamed in his spirit. And in his time, he threatened the status quo. Mystics always seem to do that, don't they? They always threaten the status quo. And they point to how religion gets sidetracked with formality and intellectualizing. And the heart kind of gets dried up when it gets too formalized. I think what happens is the mystic appears, then there's a religion founded around them, and then those folks, after 100 years or 200 years, they're interpreting, but they're not enlightened. So the mystics come back around and wake us up again. And I feel like now we're in an era where we're all waking up. So the mystic in us is waking up. I think of when Jesus arrived on the scene. It was, his message was dripping with love, right? Love God, love your neighbor. Forgive, serve others, know God directly, right? And of course, the religious and political leaders at that time, they were really threatened because the power of love and the power of truth is the greatest power. It's greater than any man could covet on this earth. It just is beyond any government, any politician, any church leader, any priest, any rabbi. So it's said that Hafiz wrote like 5,000 poems, but only 500 to 700 survived. The rest were destroyed by clerics and rulers who disapproved of the content. Daniel Ladinsky wrote that Hafiz was considered a spiritual rebel whose insights emancipate his readers from the clutches of those in power. That's what I'm trying to say. Here's a bit more of his untamed spirit. The beloved has gone completely wild. He has poured himself into me. I am blissful and drunk and overflowing. Dear world, draw life from my sweet body. Dear wayfaring souls, come drink your fill of liquid rubies. For God has made my heart an eternal fountain. Liquid rubies. That sounds good. So my favorite Hafiz book is I Heard God Laughing, and it's renderings of Hafiz by Daniel Ladinsky. And I have a sweet story about how I came to acquire that book and how I discovered Hafiz. It happened back around 1996. I was touring with Alma. I was singing, I think, for Devi Bava, and I sang like for an hour. And back then, I just seemed to vacillate between this incredible longing, just an almost unbearable ache in my soul for union with the divine, and then bouts of bliss, like feeling like, oh, I have the barrel tied to my back of all this bliss. And so I would vacillate. And the longing takes you there, especially when you're singing in front of a great saint. It really is the most powerful setting. So I finished singing, and I got in line to have her darshan. And this man in front of me, he just turns around and he just beams this beatific smile, and his eyes are all watery. And he just thanks me. He just thanks me for touching his heart deeply. And then he asked if I could hold his place in line. He wanted to go get something. So he goes and gets something. He comes back with his book, and he hands me this book, I Heard God Laughing, Renderings of Hafiz by Daniel Ladinsky. And then he introduces himself as Daniel Ladinsky. And I just really didn't realize how much I treasured it, but it soon became one of my very favorite books. And it's amazing that one book didn't burn in the Paradise Fire. I was in that, my house and all my things were in that fire, but I was traveling to Brighton Bush to give a retreat during that fire, and I had that book with me. And it survived, and it's just so precious to me. It's one of my very few books I have that survived the fire. And I never saw Daniel again, but I followed his work, and he has since, he's published many books on Hafiz and Rumi. I highly recommend it, his work. I like his blogs too. I've been reading his blogs. Yeah. So there are references that define Sufism as a mystical branch of Islam. A lot of references that call it a mystical branch of Islam that emerged after the birth of Islam, which was 620 AD. Even Hafiz's name, it means one who has memorized the Quran, which is interesting. But there's a lot of theologians that suggest that Sufism may be the essence of ancient Greek philosophy, way, way, way before Islam. And that Socrates, Moses, and even Jesus preached the essence of Sufism. There's a general term and practice in Sufism called zikr. Am I saying that right? Okay, zikr, yeah. Which literally means divine remembrance, which, goes with Hafiz saying, always remember God. And so the remembrance is through the similar practices in every other spiritual path, devotion and discipline and cultivating awareness. It's similar to Buddhism's Dharma. In Buddhism, we have the three jewels. We have the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the Dharma is the path. It's the way. It's the practices. So the core prayer is La ilaha illallah. Did I say that right? Really, I should have Lark give this talk because this has been her path for 25 years. She is going to teach us a Sufi dance. Oh, wonderful.
And that's much more than a dance. Your words here, it should be you, not we.
Ah,
It's actually the benediction to the universal worship that Mercy did.
okay. And that's what we're going to do.
And I've been on this path for 50 years.
Wow, wow, wonderful. So for me, the difference between Islam and present-day Sufism is really similar to the difference between traditional Christianity and unity. That's kind of, as I've been engrossing myself in this, because it feels like it's born of this longing to return to this heart-centered focus and a direct experience of the divine, right? Versus formalities and conceptualizing and left brain, the left brain analyzing. My friend Jeffrey years ago gave me a heart with wings, a beautiful little pin that I do still have. That was with me in my car during that fire. And I didn't know at the time that is the symbol for Sufism. And of course, it's we want our hearts to take flight into greater love, into that ecstatic union with the divine, with that one ultimate reality. I was talking to a friend last week, and we were talking about what's like the best thing about being on Earth. Like when you leave, if you get to go stand before a universal council and they say, what's the best part about life on Earth? I would say three things. I would say love, music, and nature. What do you think? Yeah, I mean, the Sufi master, there's so many, but I want to talk a little bit about Hazrat Inayat Kahn. That's the prayer I opened with, and he brought Sufism to the West. He was also a master musician. He played the veena. And he said music is an instrument of divinity, a roadmap to God. He called music the divine art, and I have to agree. And he coined something called the unity of religious ideals. And he was so incredibly interfaith. This was, over 100 years ago when he came. But he said that we discover this unity of religious ideals when we seek to understand the sacred scriptures of the Quran, Torah, New Testament, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, Dhammapada, Tao Te Ching, and what he termed the sacred book of nature. Isn't that, I was like, when I first read that, I went, oh, the sacred book of nature, is that a book I haven't read? And then I realized it's a metaphor, He's talking about nature. And he says, there is one holy book, the sacred manuscript of nature, the only scripture which can enlighten the reader. I just love that. He explains it this way. He says, most people consider as sacred scriptures only certain books written by the hand of man and carefully preserved as holy, to be handed down to posterity and divine revelation. Men have fought and disputed over the authenticity of these books and have refused to accept any other book of similar character. The Sufi has, of all ages, respected all such books and has traced in the Vedanta, Kabbalah, Bible, Quran, and all other sacred scriptures the same truth which he reads in the incorruptible manuscript of nature. The incorruptible manuscript of nature, the only holy book, he says, the perfect and living model that teaches the inner law of life. I just love that because I love scripture, but I love nature more, it's just my spiritual practice. I have to be in nature every day. It doesn't matter if it's snowing or raining or whatever it's doing. So he compares sacred text and nature, what we can learn from nature this way. He says, all scriptures before nature's manuscript are as little pools of water before the ocean. I think that's pretty amazing. So I have a sweet little story about a profound teaching that I received from nature's manuscript, from one of God's creatures. I was living in Mount Shasta, and I was walking at the lake one day, and it was summertime, and I was going to go for a swim, and I came upon a little tiny chipmunk in the middle of the path. He was just laying there, not moving. He was in the hot sun, and he was like a perfect little chipmunk. He had all his fur and his little feet and his little tail with that stripe, but he was just laying there, and I wondered what to do. And I thought, I better move him out of the sun, because it was really, really hot, and somebody would step on him or a dog might get him. So I very carefully picked him up and put him in the shade on this rock. And then I went swimming, and I thought, I'll just see if he's there when I get back. Maybe his mom will come get him. I thought he probably fell out of a nest. So I went swimming and spent the afternoon down by the lake, and it was almost dark, and I came back, and he was still there in the same spot, and he hadn't moved. So I just felt the guidance. If you want this little guy to live, you better take him home. His mom's not coming. So I took him home. And, he was in my hand, and he just moved a little bit. And when I got him home, I gave him some water, and he kind of perked up a bit. And a little more water, and he perked up a little more, and he was lifting his head up and looking around. So I held him for a while, and then I had to finally go to bed, so I put him in this little box I made. Well, he started just crying. This first noise he made, this mournful, heartbreaking cry, So I picked him back up, and he stopped crying immediately. And so I held him for another hour, and I tried to give him soy milk. He didn't want soy milk. That's all I had. I'm non-dairy, right? So I didn't have anything else. So I finally put him back down, and he did that crying thing again, but it was like, look, I got to go to bed. So in the morning, I Googled, how do you take care of a chipmunk, right? And I went to the pet store. You get puppy replacement formula, right? And a little dropper. So I tried to feed him, and he would not drink out of the dropper. So I just started putting the formula in the crack in my hand, and he would bury his little nose, and like he was nursing from my hand, he would drink and drink and drink. And he started drinking so much, and he got like really strong. And, I carried him around everywhere, because when I would put him down, he would do that crying thing. And I realized this is a high maintenance chipmunk, I named him Alvin. So, he got strong, and here I was sitting at my computer, writing my talks, holding Alvin, or I'm out on the porch watering my flowers. I got Alvin with me. I'm making dinner. I got Alvin in my hand, right? And he'd run up and down my arm. So after a few weeks of this, I had to go on tour, and my partner, Chuck, was not nearly as enamored with Alvin. He definitely wasn't going to be carrying him around 24/7. He let that be known, and I didn't blame him. So I called the pet store, and they sent me to this man, Dave, that rehabilitated wild animals, especially chipmunks and squirrels. So I called Dave, and Dave said he would take Alvin. He came over, and as I went to hand him Alvin, I said, now, I have to tell you, I hold him all the time. And I mean, like the day I brought him home, he just cried, and I just basically hold him all the time. And Dave said, I am so glad you are willing to do that, because when they're that young, they will not survive if they are not held and they are not loved. And it was just such a teaching to me, you know, that the littlest, tiniest little creature could teach me about the need for love, how we all need love. So Dave, I ran into him at the co-op like 9 months later, and he raised Alvin, and he set him free in his yard, and he would see him every now and then, and he was doing great. So I really relate. I really relate to this teaching, Hazrat, and his holy book of nature, and the text of God's writing being living creatures, and how these living creatures teach us about love, how all of nature teaches us about love, and perhaps more than any old 1,000-year-old text can, right? So in closing, gosh, the vast history of Sufism, you know, I can barely scratch the surface in a talk, but I hope you will explore more Hazrat Inayat Khan's teachings especially. There's a lot of great websites. And also just meditate on the transmission of the Sufi mystical poetry. We're gonna have one more right now from Daniel. Of Hafiz and Rumi and Kabir, which I didn't get to because I'm so enamored of Hafiz. But there are many ways to remember God. You know, it's really about remembrance of God. And Hafiz said, find out what actions of yours bring freedom and love. Find out what actions of yours bring freedom and love. It's pretty simple. And I would say call to the divine friend, or sing even better, or dance to the divine friend intensely. Right? Says you just take one step towards God. God takes 99 steps towards you, but you have to mean it. You have to mean it. You have to call with intensity, with devotion. So you are loved, you are love, and you are the beloved. We are the beloved. It's there behind every pair of eyes. That light that created everything. May we grow, may we shine, and may we awaken fully to the astonishing light of our being. Thank you.